Everybody knows that the birth of a child is an amazing thing, a new life brought into the world and can experience everything life has to offer. Before that can happen, a woman carries the child for 9 months during pregnancy. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting stories involving pregnancy. A 91-year-old finds out she's been pregnant for 60 years. The first of today's stories starts in the quaint coastal town of La Boca, located in Chile. Estela Melendez and her husband Manuel were married for 74 years at the time of Manuel's death. 74 years of marriage is an impressive feat in itself, however, this story starts on a more somber note. Unfortunately, in 2015, Estela woke up one morning like any other day, but to her dismay, her husband Manuel lay unresponsive in their bed and was later declared deceased. Absolutely devastated, Estela was preparing for dramatic change in her life. Now living without her husband of 74 years, however, her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. Whilst mourning her husband, Estela began reflecting upon the life in which they shared together and began to dwell on the regrets she had, and one especially stood out from the rest. Estela yearned for children, but unfortunately they could never conceive a child together. Estela's case had actually baffled doctors because they couldn't see any reason that she couldn't have children. She should have been able to. After the loss of her husband, Estela began to retreat into a much quieter life, mostly keeping to herself, and unfortunately, she ended up losing her hearing and then later nearly losing all mobility due to severe arthritis. To make matters worse, Estela then had an accident roughly a year after Manuel's passing. Now this is when Estela's life had a dramatic change which she couldn't imagine. Estela tripped and fell over whilst going about her day-to-day life. Luckily, she was able to reach a phone for help and contacted a friend to take her the near 40-mile trip to the closest hospital. Once at the hospital, doctors immediately carried out x-rays, and instead of injuries from her fall, something else caught the doctor's attention. Now, Estela had previously been diagnosed with a tumour around her uterine area, but upon another examination, it turns out it wasn't a tumour after all. Tragically, it was in fact an incredibly rare case of lithopedion, which in layman's terms is known as stone baby. Incredibly rare, with only around 300 cases recorded worldwide, lithopedion is a condition in which the fetus grows outside the uterus. Estela's story is different to most still though. As is commonplace with this condition, the fetus is simply absorbed by the mother's body after time. This was not the case with Estela. In an even rarer case, the fetus had solidified into hardened calcium carbonate. Due to Estela's age, 91 at the time, doctors refused to perform any kind of surgery to remove the fetus, and Estela simply returned home. But again, it was not that simple. Estela found her home engulfed in a horde of reporters and TV crews, all wanting the scoop on her remarkable story. Estela would go on to tell her story and engage with a global audience on the biggest news shows in the world, but even after that, she simply returned to life as it had been before her trip to the hospital. Rajo Devi, the world's oldest new mother. In November 2008, in Aliwa, a remote village located in northern India, what's been described as a biological miracle occurred. A baby was born with a difference to the normality we are used to. The mother of this child was 70 years old at the time of birth. Rajo Devi Lohan is the proud mother of this newborn, named Naveen. Rajo Devi is known around the globe as the world's oldest first-time mother. Rajo Devi had been endlessly hoping for most of her adult life for a child, and was overjoyed when she finally managed to conceive and give birth through IVF at the age of 70. Rajo Devi Lohan, along with her husband Baba Ram, tried to have children for many years before deciding, along with Rajo Devi Lohan's sister, to instead focus on building a life and a home for themselves. They quickly became the talk of the local village and were labelled the people who couldn't have children. In Aliwa, where Rajo Devi and Baba Ram lived, things were very different to what people in places like Delhi were living like at the time, despite being only around 100 miles away. In Aliwa, the community abides by a traditional order centered around religious festivals, harvest, and hierarchies. Rajo Devi and Baba Ram would share shirts and an old television amongst their few possessions. Neither of them could read or write. Not much was spoken about in modern advances in fertility treatments and general pregnancy science. This was until, through a neighbour in their village, they found out about a 60-year-old woman that had managed to have not only one child, but twins through IVF treatment. This procedure was carried out at a nearby hospital around 20 miles away from where Raju Devi and Baba Ram lived. Intrigued and excited, Raju Devi and Baba Ram went to visit the family they heard about to try and find out more about their miracle baby. After talking with the family and finding out the simple process, they were sold and were going to try it for themselves. They did exactly that. After selling 2 buffaloes, mortgaging their crops, and taking out a government loan, they ventured the small 20-mile trip to a doctor that was willing to carry out the IVF procedure on Raju Devi. In India, there is no law regulating IVF treatment, meaning if the doctor is willing to do it, then this treatment can be carried out at no matter what age. And that is exactly how Raju Devi had her baby. The IVF treatment was carried out with a donor egg and then implanted into Raju Devi's womb. She would then continue to work for the first month of her pregnancy, experiencing little to no discomfort. After a relatively uneventful pregnancy and just 8 weeks to go, an ultrasound scan flagged up something very concerning. Raju Devi was at risk of losing the child. After losing 3 litres of blood and a month in hospital, Raju Devi finally gave birth by caesarean. Despite the baby only weighing a light 3 pounds and 5 ounces, the baby and mother were safe and well. The Great Stork Derby. Held between 1926 to 1936 in Toronto, Canada, the Great Stork Derby was a competition in which women competed to see who could give birth to the most babies in a 10-year period. At this point, you might be wondering why on earth were there women in Canada competing to see who could give birth to the most babies for 10 years? Well, it was actually for something a bit unusual. The will of Charles Miller is what prompted this bizarre competition. Charles was a very wealthy financier and lawyer, and when he died in 1926, his will stated that a large proportion of his wealth and estate would be given to the woman that managed to give birth to the most babies in the 10 years following his death. And so, the baby boom began. Not surprisingly, during his life, Charles was known by those close to him as a prankster and loved nothing more than playing a practical joke on someone. Upon his death, not only did he leave this competition, he left his holiday home in Jamaica to 3 lawyers that were known to hate each other on the specific condition that they had to live there together. A frantic race ensued for the women that could give birth to the most babies, and over the 10-year period of the competition, newspapers and media began following it closely. Something Charles did not foresee was the Great Depression, and that his estate would become a beacon of hope for many families around Toronto that needed it. On Halloween 1936, the competition ended, and Judge William Edward Middleton, a sympathetic man to the now very large families, ended up deciding on a draw between 4 different women. Annie Catherine Smith, Kathleen Ellen Nagel, Lucy Alice Timleck, and Isabel Mary McLean were the winners, all giving birth to 9 children, and they were awarded around $2 million adjusted for inflation. This enabled the mother to pay for education for their children and help them live better lives. But what do you make of these interesting stories involving pregnancy? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.